Um, Hello, everyone. I'm so happy that we managed to make a live masterclass after more than a year. So the last masterclass that we did live in this cinema was back in 2019. Then there was nothing happening in 2020 except some online masterclasses. And I'm so happy that we have again live masterclass together with online streaming, and that we have international guests here in Zagreb, Swedish director Fredrik Gertten, and we have also premiere of his documentary film from 2019, Push, that will be distributed in this cinema and some other cinemas, art house cinemas in Croatia. And today we will have a masterclass by Fredrik. The subject will be something about a documentary film and a political responsibility. And I invite you to ask questions, no matter if you've seen before his films or if you didn't see his films, but please ask the questions because there are so many interesting stories with his filmography. He's one of the rare documentary filmmakers that has been sued because of his documentary film by a multinational company. So we will hear about this also today, but also about his way, his directorial approach, the way he's interviewing people, choosing characters, working with cinematographers and editors, choosing subjects, doing the extensive research, which is very important for his films. And also, what is also very important is for his films is this social impact that his films are always having on the society. So, warm welcome to Fredrik.
So, hello. Well, it's nice to be the live event in Zagreb, the live document. I'm a live person. It's like it's a good thing to be, and I'm really grateful for Restart to invite me to Zagreb. You know, my life, as all your other lives, has been cancelled big time, and my meeting audience has been cancelled. So to come here is like, they asked me if I want to come, and I said, of course. The film was supposed to have premiere in March 2020 at Zagreb Docs, and then it was cancelled the same week, and then I was supposed to be here in November, and then it got cancelled. But now I'm here. It's cool. A little bit delayed, but I'm here. So my work. Have you seen any of my films? Yeah, I'm just checking. It's good to know. I mean, I think Zagreb is the Zagreb Docs is probably one of the festivals who's shown most of my work. So it's been, I'm really grateful. I actually had breakfast with Nenad Puhovsky this morning. And so, I mean, I was just looking back at, I was in the board of the European Documentary Network with Nenad a long time ago, and at the time when there was no film fund in Croatia, and I mean overall, what I would say that our genre of documentaries has grown stronger for every year, and the audience is bigger, and the quality of the film is higher, which is really cool. And there's a lot of young filmmakers coming out doing very cool projects. So I love our doc world. Nobody gets rich. Nobody will ever drive a fancy car, but I think it's okay. We have more fun than the other guys. So I hope you smile behind, because I can't really see if you have all these masks. But it's okay. It's okay. I actually had a Q&A in Japan before everyone had a mask, so I'm trained at least with it. But it's a bit odd to have all your eyes and no no faces. But yes. Anyway, so I've been doing films for quite a long time. I would say probably more than 25 years. And I'm of course older than 25, so I've also been doing other stuff before. I was a journalist, and before being a journalist, I was well, I've been doing a lot of things. I dropped out of school, started to work at a rubber factory, and then at a shipyard for 4 years, and then I became like an activist in the music scene, organized concerts and music festivals and a record company. But then I entered into journalism, and I traveled a lot. I traveled to South America a lot because I learned to speak Spanish. I worked in Chile during the last year of dictatorships in Central America. I worked in South Africa several times until I was able to interview Mandela when he was out of the prison, and around the world. So I have this kind of that background, but I've also been like a local activist in my own town, Malmö, Sweden. So so I have both this kind of the one leg in the local, one in the global. And when I had this breakfast with Nena this morning, he said he had an impression that we, the Swedes, only do international films and we don't care about our own society, which is not really true. And I think my films, these are not all my films. The Dead Donkeys is only as a producer, but this presentation is made for another event, so I just wanted to have it up. But I think my films are both local and global at the same time. That's at least my intention, to make films that can speak into the local debate, but it can speak into a local debate in many countries and in many cities. So that's kind of what I've been trying to do. In some way, concentrate the films in a way so they don't become too local or too regional. And that's a very interesting process to keep that out. Here we have more people coming. Wow, welcome. There are seats over here. Come closer, because it's nicer to have people close, even if I don't see any faces. It's like welcome. So you see up in the corner, there is a film about a young football player called Zlatan Ibrahimovic. And that's a part of for a long time when my children were small, I did almost only films in my own town. And we made 2 feature films together with my brother about the football team of Malmö. And for the second film, we found a very interesting character. It was look for a character, a problematic character, and that character was a guy who had never done an interview before, and he wasn't even playing in the A team, but it was the young Zlatan Ibrahimovic. So he entered into our film because he was a very interesting character, not because he was going to be famous, because nobody knew. So in some way we were sitting on a very unique material of then somebody who was to become a superstar. So that's becoming Zlatan. Then many years later we made a film from our old material and other material that opened at IDFA in 2015, and it's been out on, it's still out a lot, but I'm just pointing out that I'm not only doing political films, or what is a political film. I'm not so happy with these labels of this is a political film, this is not a political film. I think in some way to point the camera, you make it an obvious choice, you know. So if you point the camera towards people without power, it's a political statement in some way. So I think it's mainly the perspective you choose. And I think most filmmakers that I like have some kind of perspective from below. Their heart are with the people that are less powerful in our society. So we don't really make portraits of the most powerful people in the world because they buy their own films anyway. So I think that's the political statement. But then one day I got an email from two Swedish journalists living in Nicaragua, and they had an idea about the film, and it was banana workers that were suffering from a pesticide that made them sterile. But also a lot of other factors. Children were born without arms and legs, and there was like a big scandal ongoing for a long time. And I thought it could be interesting. And as I then speak Spanish, and I've been working this was Nicaragua, Central America, I said, okay, I can go and check it out. And then I bumped into this story, Bananas. Anybody seen the film? But I can still play the trailer, so at least you can have a reminder. Is that okay? Let's see.
Cada día que una persona muere, que trabajó en una bananera y fue expuesto a este químico, es una victoria más para la Dole Food Company. Es una victoria más cada vez que uno falle. I do not like when other people are exploited. I've never liked it since I was a little kid. I never liked the big guy picking the little guy.
Did you have any information at all that there was a chemical at work that could affect your fertility?
No.
Nunca lo dijeron nada.
They never told us anything about that.
Did you ever notice an unusual odor?
Yes, of course.
Did anyone ever tell you that if you could smell that chemical, you were breathing too much of it, that it could hurt you?
No.
This is bigger than just a case. This is the very first time ever that agricultural workers from a third world nation are heard in the United States court.
It's kind of the end product of what we produce basically all over the world.
We have an American corporation overseas presenting itself as the face of America. You will not find one sentence, one thought, one concern for the effect of this chemical on their workers, even after they knew.
The claim that's being made now is a very nasty claim. It's a very nasty claim.
Ya queda más una alma más que se la llevaron a esta bananera. Su conciencia, realmente su conciencia, es como una guerra.
Hace poco que están pagando hasta $300 por un afectado. Ustedes que están escuchando este programa, oigan mi voz, no firmen nada.
This gentleman, before he ever stepped foot on a farm, was infertile. You have a liar here. And you have so many examples of that with these plans.
Terrible.
Man, in 4 hours they throw a lot of issues into the air.
As far as I'm concerned, I want a verdict. I don't want that process stopped. We're not calling them for lunch. I want a verdict.
Yeah, so that film was, in some way, it was I went down to do research, and you scout around and say, where is the story? How do you tell the story? You know there is a big injustice, but how do you tell it? I was out meeting a lot of different people, but we were also out trying to shoot around the banana plantations, which is kind of almost impossible because they're all private and there are always armed guards everywhere. But suddenly when we were out at one place, there was somebody saying, hey, there is one of the old leaders just died. So we went to a house and we knocked the door, and the coffin was on the little table in the shed, and we said, can we film? And we just started to film, and then suddenly they bring him to the church, and with his procession. That was like during research. And then the priest gave a very political speech. So in some way we got somebody who summarized the story. But then people in that situation that have been fighting for so many years, they were really down and below. Not so much happened. So it would be in many ways, if I'd stayed in Nicaragua, the film would have been very slow and, not so much action. So when I found out that there was an American lawyer trying to bring this to court, I was actually in Nicaragua, and the news came that this court case was going to happen, and I Googled and I found this very charismatic, crazy Cuban-American lawyer with accidentes. He was basically a lawyer that makes money out of traffic accidents and so on, and who had entered into this. So for me it became interesting because he was also a guy that we didn't know if he was only doing this to get money or for sure he did it because he wanted to make money. And he was driving a Ferrari, smoking Cuban cigars, and so I liked that touch of it. So, and then there was one more thing in this case. It was also that Dole's CEO, the boss of Dole, he had actually worked in Nicaragua when this pesticide was used, so they could actually call him into the court case. That's very rare that a CEO actually lands in court. So it became quite unique and stressful for this big company, which is the biggest fruit company on the planet. They're really big. But I wasn't so worried about getting problems because Los Angeles Times, AP, Bloomberg, everybody was basically telling the same story as I was going to do. But then we did the film. It was hard to make the film with all this court case material. There were 50 days of court case, and we bought 30 days. And we really, we worked a lot to shape a story from this material. Amazing editors, Danish editors, Jesper Osmund, and mainly, and it wasn't easy to make it fly. Court cases are horrible because they kind of never end, and it's a lot of talking and so on. And there was a camera in the courtroom, but it was a fixed camera with a guy with a joystick was running. We took him for beer, so we tried to make him give us some extra shots, but it was like it was hard to make that really live, that material. But then the film was done. The film was accepted to Los Angeles Film Festival, and we thought, wow, this is perfect. We can have the world premiere in the same city where the story happens. And LA Film Festival is now gone. It was big. It was totally Hollywood, big stars, big names. I met, you name it, all the big stars in a very short time when I was there. But when we presented this trailer, we let it out on the internet on our website, and we said, now we're going to be in the LA Film Festival. It took 24 hours, and we got a letter from Dole. And that letter said, take down the website, take down the trailer, don't show the film. If you show the film, we will sue you. And that letter was the same day sent to all the sponsors of the festival, everybody in the board of the festival. And this is, remember, this is one of the biggest companies in the world. And in Los Angeles, they also had a big media investment, so they had a lot of money into films. The sons of the owner was best friends with all the Hollywood people. So it was what I thought was like a great place to have a premiere. It became a very hot place to have a premiere. So when I received the letters, I thought, it might be interesting, because now all these Hollywood people will come, will be my friends. We will now fight for freedom of speech together, because they selected the film. But what I didn't think about was that when big guys act like that, they do it with a lot of energy, and they find ways to shift the focus from the real story. The real story, we know what it was. It was banana workers being harmed by a pesticide that made them sterile. But Dole created a totally different story. They had a PR company shaping a story, contacting journalists, and it wasn't like any journalist. It was like the most influential journalist at the AP, so it was, or many other newspapers. So they could get this story out all over the world. And the story was that a Swedish stupid filmmaker had made a film about a crooked lawyer who was like bribing his way into to make money. So it was, and this lawyer would probably go to jail. That was the story. They sold it to the media. And that was suddenly something that was really much more complicated. And so I was a little bit hesitant how to handle this, but for sure I needed to find a way to defend myself. I mean, there was two options. One option was, of course, not to go to. I mean, I could decide to stay home in Sweden maybe, and just forget about the film. But in one way, when you made a film, you worked so hard. It's your own ego, of course, in some ways, but it's also the story of the people, the story of the banana workers. Dole was not going after me, basically. They were going after the story of the banana workers. They didn't want people to know about what they had done. So I said, okay, I have to go, but I have to find a way to defend myself. And then I thought the best way to defend myself would probably be to have a camera around me all the time. So I can, if they are going to give me a paper, I want to have it on film. It was like some way of trying to resist. So then I started to make this film.
Dole Foods is suing a Swedish filmmaker for wanting to show a fraudulent documentary slamming the company.
Wow.
Malmöfilmaren Fredrik Gertten stäms av det amerikanska bananföretaget Dole. Företaget hävdar att filmen Bananas är en bluff.
The film is based on a sham. That's the point.
But you haven't seen the film.
I've already told you no, Charlotte.
So you're fighting against this incredibly bizarre situation where people are saying the film is wrong and they haven't seen it.
You see this? This is the front page of the LA Business Journal. Documentary turns Doe foe into hero despite evidence that he fabricated facts in court case. And the writer hasn't even seen the film.
We have a media that is corrupted by power.
I think you're being a little bit naive if you think that you can take a pop at a big multinational and expect to walk away without some sort of fight on your hands.
I stämningen kräver de att filmen ska läggas ner, hemsidan ska läggas ner och att jag aldrig mer ska uttala mig i frågan.
This is serious. This really is accomplishing the objective, shutting down the speech.
They spend millions on their brand every year, and you're going to come in and start attacking their brand. What did you think was going to happen?
So that film was made in some kind of defense. I mean, being sued by a big company, the whole idea by suing a filmmaker is the most aggressive way to tell you to just go and hide yourself. And of course they want to silence the film. And when I was in LA at this film festival, they both have fiction and documentaries. My film was one of 7 films in competition for $50,000 award. And of course they moved us out of the competition. They showed the film in some kind of gated way where they made it like a showcase that what happens if your film is not correct. So they gave a paper to everybody entering the cinema. Everybody had to read it. And it said that the film was wrong, that people were lying in my film. And Dole had like 7 people in the room, including their vice president and their lawyers. And they then after the film there was a panel where people were discussing truth in documentary. And you know, I was sitting there, I was so angry. I was extremely angry. And I know, you know, you should talk to the banana workers what is truth or not, you know, you don't talk to Dole. But I had a good team around me, and my American press agent and others told me to, if I'm angry, don't show it too much, you know, try to keep calm. And it was, let's say, it's a very interesting experience to show the film in a room where the enemy is sitting in front of you, and the enemy really wants to take you down in the most brutal way. And then the people who you think are your friends, they're selling you to save their own skin. Because that was something I understood, that in the US, people are really scared. It's a scare culture, more than in many other countries. I mean, we can all be scared, of course, but in the US, people are scared to lose everything. And especially if you have something, you're scared of a lawsuit. So it was, people were basically turning their back to me, you know, and I was like I was the guy who destroyed the party by going around and looking a bit sad and stressed when everybody had a had a great party. I came home, and then we finally got sued, and that was of course intense, and it was in the middle of the summer, so. You know, even in Sweden, people, the Swedish Film Institute, the Swedish TV, everybody this is too close. Maybe you have to solve this yourself. It's you know, everybody was like pushing me a little bit away. So for a long time, it was. I felt very lonely. But we kept fighting, and suddenly people started to talk about it, and when I had made interviews, Dole started to call the people who had interviewed me. It became like a very bizarre circus in some way. And of course, I kept documenting what happened to me. And in the end, I showed a film in the Swedish Parliament where I actually managed to get MPs from the two biggest parties, then the Conservative Party and the Social Democrats, people who normally just hate each other, but in some way they came in defending the freedom of speech. And that became a big turnaround for our struggle. But then how to make a film about this material? I I had a lot of choices, and one way could be to make like Bananas 2, you know, in one way tell the same story about the same bad guys one more time, about Dole, because I knew even more about them now. But then I was working very intensely with a Danish film editor, Niels Pag Andersen, who is like a very, very strong editor, and he was really stepping up and helping me as a personal friend during this period. And we talked a lot, and we decided to make a film about the technique they used to silence us, the technique they used to shift the focus away from the message from the banana workers. And it meant that I suddenly made a very different film from what I have done before. I made interviews with people on camera, you know, experts. You know, it's like it was for me a film I have never done before, and you know, having this kind of how do the most powerful in our world buy the political agenda? How do they control the messaging in the society? That became much more something I started to be interested in. How, because you know, when you are under that pressure, I could see that journalists were running away from me. Journalists who had loved my film, suddenly they just left because they couldn't write, because their bosses say, or the lawyers of the newspaper said, you can't do this. So I was like, especially in the US, I was totally deserted, and I found that really interesting. So in some way, the pressure I was on personally taught me something about society. I saw patterns. I saw patterns that I could then, if I can make these patterns into the film can also tell a bigger story than just Fredrik versus Dole. Of course, the Fredrik versus Dole is in some way the film, but the film also comes out with a total different understanding of society, I think. And I've been to this with this film in so many places, like in Mexico, and the audience are like almost crying because this is exactly what happens in our society. Or I've been to in Montenegro together with the editor of the biggest newspaper, who had the same problem, you know, with censorship and pressure from corrupt interests and so on. I mean, suddenly, if you can make the film in a way so it tells a more global story than your own, then suddenly it has something. So that film was, for me, kind of a start of a new kind of filmmaking in some way. The film was made with small money, because Bananas was quite a well-funded film. We had sold the US TV rights before. We had Arte on board. We had like almost 900,000 euros budget in 27. So I mean, it's some years ago. The Big Boys Gone Bananas was almost impossible to fund. None of these big ones wanted to come on board. They were all like, maybe you shouldn't do this film, was basically the message I got. So I think I have like 35 different DPs or photographers because I traveled myself, and I was hired a camera here, you know, I was like jumping, and I was basically funding my travels through invitations to show Bananas, and then I was doing interviews. I was trying to combine different jobs kind of in some way. So the film is not aesthetically one piece. It's kind of, it goes in all directions, but it's, I learned something about this kind of, in one way, a local story. You know, it's a Swedish filmmaker being sued, but suddenly the film told a story about the control of the message. and of course, and how the most powerful do when we irritate them in some way. So it's so that made me think, okay, the powerful are they're trying to move politics in all other directions also. So, and I'm always, you know, city planning has always been something I'm very interested in. I've always been a bicyclist. I've been, you know, a local activist in my neighborhood. You know, I mean, I'm always been kind of interested. So suddenly, when I was doing out with Big Boys Gone Bananas, actually already at the premiere of Bananas in Los Angeles, I met a writer who had written a book about the banana industry, its history, and he also was a very avid bicyclist. So he became a friend, and he is in Big Boys. But then we talked a lot about biking. So in the end, I said, okay, now maybe I now have an idea of how I could do a film about city planning and the lobby-driven city planning that we have in our cities. So that's how I entered into do Bike versus Cars. Bike versus Cars is very much an inspiration from Big Boys Gone Bananas. Anybody seen Bike versus Cars? I love you. I love you. It's been to Zagreb, dogs, and it's yeah, it's a film. It came also in 2015, I think. Yeah, it premiered at South by Southwest with a big outdoor screening, big screen outside. It was fun, and it's been playing since then all over the world. It's been a very successful film in some ways. It's been traveling a lot. All these numbers are a little bit dated now, so it has even more. But it's have a look.
Roads are built for buses, cars, and trucks, not for people on bikes. My heart bleeds for them when I hear someone gets killed, but it's their own fault at the end of the day.
Julie Dias era uma menina muito alegre. E ela morreu atropelada aqui. E o que é que diferencia a decisão do prefeito entre construir ciclovias ou construir uma ponte para carros? Quem financia isso? É o X da questão para mim de todas as cidades.
The reality is that there is not one city in the world that has solved the issue of mobility through the private car. None.
Chevron spent $1.8 million on lobbying to defeat an anti-global warming bill.
I'm talking about a very broad coalition between unions and business. That's why it's so difficult to change things.
I think it's unfair to categorize the auto industry as not wanting to do something. They, of course, want to do something. Their parents and mothers and fathers, they breathe the same air we all breathe.
Car sales, it's a very good business.
Se eu simplesmente paro de andar de bicicleta, eu sou uma bicicleta a menos, eu sou uma pessoa a menos lutando pelas vontades que lhe cabem. E eu não quero ser uma pessoa a menos.
So that film started, in some way, it started differently because it wasn't about me. It wasn't about something I've been. It was, I was interested in why cities are so dysfunctional. Why do you have through Zagreb big speedy ways where cars go go crazy. It's like it's so stupid. I mean, imagine if you came from a different planet and you came down to the Earth and you saw, what is this? Why are all these things standing in line waiting for something? It's like and I mean in Los Angeles, like 80% of all land goes to parked cars or drive cars. It's like it's insane. I mean, you can imagine a political campaign 100 years ago and say, let's put asphalt on 80% of all our land so we can park our machines. I don't think you will win an election. So it is obviously a very lobby-driven city planning, where the most powerful have kind of hijacked our cities in some way. And this film, in some way I could film it everywhere. I mean, so my research was in some way going in all directions. But I wanted to film in a mega city because of course the contrasts are stronger. So I went for Sao Paulo, but it could have been Mexico City. I speak Spanish, so it would probably be easier for me in Mexico. But I was also curious on Brazil, so that's also a part of being a filmmaker. You can go wherever you want if you want to be curious. So I decided for Brazil, and then I started to follow bike blogs, Facebook accounts, Twitter accounts, Instagram accounts, and then I suddenly found this young woman who was like a young activist, and that was one. The other one was the other guy who's biking is then my banana friends from Los Angeles. So I don't really have lead characters, but I have characters we spend more time with. So it's not an essay film. It's something in between. You film school people, you can put the labels. I can't. I didn't go to any film school. And so and then of course the broadcasters, the TV people, they always ask for, yeah, but where are the positive stories? What are the solutions and so on? But I was still more interested in the conflict and to understand why we are sitting with this shit, with this poor city planning. And the nicer picture is then from Copenhagen. But in Copenhagen, I filmed with a taxi driver who actually is very frustrated because there are bikes everywhere. So it became a funny scene. The film took about 2 years to make, and I think the same for Big Boys Gone Bananas. So normally I do films quite quick. But then, have you seen Push, all of you? No? You can see it later tonight. Because Push is very much, it's like a sister of a triplet of this Big Boys and Bike versus Cars. So it's again, I'm looking to understand the global issue. Why are rents going up everywhere? What is happening? So I was looking for a global pattern, and this goes for all these three films. If you go too local, you can't really move from there, because when you're in a local context, there is so much local information, so many local names, so many local laws and stuff. So it will be very heavy. And so if you go into the wrong detail level of the films, every scene, every little separate story will be too long, and so it's impossible. So you have to find a way to minimize the amount of information. And I try to, when in my internal process, I have something I call emotional facts. I'm looking for facts that kicks you in the stomach, something that you can remember. So I think it's very much about constructing a story that something lands in the heart of the audience that they can't really move out with. I mean, from the banana story, it was obvious that the bananas I buy will harm people in poor countries because of the pesticides. So I mean, as soon as people, you don't need so much more information. 1/3 of all of the production price of banana goes to pesticides. 1/3 of the production price is chemicals. So you know, when you know that, you don't need so much more information. So I think I try to move that kind of thinking into the other films also. Not loading with too much information, but the right information. Of course, that's a long period of bringing it down, because I think a film should be around 90 minutes. I don't think you win so much by making it 2.5 hours. It's like then you will, it will be much harder. So I'm not an academic. I'm a school dropout. I've been mainly educating myself, and so I don't really have an academic take on things. But I go for things that interest me and that sticks in my mind, or that I myself react on. And basically, if I have to trust myself if I react on this, probably the audience will also do it. So that's the kind of stories I'm looking for. If you lift the focus a little bit over the nations, you can find a pattern that fits into different cities. So Bike vs. Cars then has played in 100 countries, and it's still shown a lot, even if it's now 6 years old. Because the debate on city planning is a very strong debate. And I'm sure you could show it here in Zagreb again now when you hopefully get a new mayor, because he will probably want to change the city, or we need to change the city, because it's a beautiful city, but the cars are like just flooding in, and in a very old-fashioned way. It's and I think I remember when I was here last time with that film, is that the audience said, yeah, but you know, Zagreb is special. But the thing is that when the film can create a debate in 100 countries, it means that there is something you have in common with cities all around the world. And that's the same thing we've been able to do with Push. It's like it can create a local debate, and I think that's really cool. I think I talked for a long time now, and you all have masks on. Is there anybody who would like to take the mask off to just ask a question? Because it's nice, because you're here. It's like Then you need a microphone, I think, isn't it that? Because with a mic, it helps because this is also broadcasted out on YouTube and Facebook. Hi, everybody out there. You out on Facebook and YouTube, you can also send questions. So if you send them, you can have them, I can answer them if you do it now. Isn't it? Like now? Yeah. Now, send questions. If you see this later, you can send me a question. You can send me on Twitter. That's fine. My name, Twitter, Fredrik Gertten, and then I will answer you. Okay?
I have two questions. One is very practical. When you edited Bananas with all the court material, how did you go about selecting the material, considering it's, as you said, a little boring to go through all that stuff? Did you have assistants, or did you actually go through everything yourself? What's your process? So do you want to keep it in your mind, everything that's said yourself, or do you delegate? That's one question. How long was the editing process? And the second question is the position of you as a filmmaker versus...
Take the first. Let's take one at a time. So how did I select material? and especially the court material. I think I'm too lazy to sit and do every minute myself. So I had an assistant going through with some very clear directives, and our main focus was on some characters, especially when they, the whole, this company was sued for making their workers sterile. The problem is that these workers started to work when they were like 17, 16, 18 years old. So now in the court, they should prove that they were fertile before they started to work. So if they were if they had a lot of sex and there was no baby coming out, maybe they were sterile already. So that was like the sick case, and so we were looking for those details. And basically the hearings with the banana workers was like, well, these are the guys who picked our bananas. And now they're sitting here and they need to pull down their pants and say, I think I could have had a baby, but I don't, But it's very cynical. But I mean, and then of course we looked into other key parts of the court. The court case was broadcasted, so I could sit in Sweden and follow it. I was in court several times, but I was also, I didn't have a budget to stay there for 2.5 months, and my kids were small, and all that kind of stuff. So I was coming and going, but I was sitting at home watching it live also. That was one question.
The second one is your position as an activist personally versus your position on activism, you being a documentary filmmaker. Do you ever stop yourself while you're making a film and do you step back and say, I am not allowed to be an activist, I will let the story do it? Or do you allow yourself to actually go for activism deliberately in your films?
To be honest, I always hated to be labeled an activist filmmaker. I was kind of angry when people start to call me that. I think my job is storytelling, to make a film, and when I do the film, my focus is to make a film that works and functions. I'm not thinking about, now I want to have these details, so that will be good for the struggle. Not at all. I mean, also, in Bananas, I have the lawyer driving a Ferrari through Los Angeles, a red Ferrari, and smoking Cuban cigars. That's not really an activist take, and a lot of activists actually criticized me for his driving of a Ferrari. For me, it made it more interesting. So I don't have an activist hat on making films. But when the film is there, I want the film to travel. I want the film to have some impact. And of course, then you start to see, okay, what can we do? Who can we work with? How can we frame this? So of course, and now as I've been into this for a while, I sometimes I have that kind of other brain on also, but I don't think it's. I believe in complexity in the people in front of the camera and in the storytelling. I don't want to make a black and white story. And not everything that is said in the films are my opinions, So it's and I also, the experience from meeting audience with my films is that if people are coming out with different conclusions. I know, I showed a film in the Swedish Parliament where at least 50% are right-wing, and a lot of people got touched by the film anyway. And that goes for the other films too, where right-wing columnists have been, liking my films, I think that's good. I don't want to be labeled as some political tendency and so on. When I speak about freedom of speech, I say freedom of speech is in the constitution of all countries in the world. So how can it be left-wing or right-wing? That same goes for the traffic. Even if you're right-wing and on a bike, you can also get killed by poor city planning, and on and on. So I don't want to be placed in a corner. And if people call me activist filmmaker, I don't hit them anymore. But I maybe I have to accept it. But it's it's storytelling. But of course, I mean, I've always been politically interested. I worked as a journalist, so as a journalist, we collect a lot of information, and I've been around for a while, so of course I have a deep perspective on developments around the world. Of course, that's a good thing. And maybe I'm a political person, but I don't belong to a party and so on. That was your 2 questions. Anybody else with question? Yes. You turned it off, I think.
Yeah. Okay. I really like how you said you always look for emotional facts when filming. Can you tell us a bit more about the research process? Do you have a steady way that you start with for every film? Does it completely depend on the topic? Or did it change in any way from when you started filming till now, your research process? Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, I wish I had a very smart answer. I would say that my research is something I do over years and years and years and years. So, I mean, my research is mainly being a curious person. So, I mean, the banana story is somebody, I mean, if you worked in Latin America and you read books about the history and so on, you know about the banana republics, about the, it's there somewhere. And then when you talk about bicycles or freedom of speech and so on, it is stories that I've been, I mean, I was writing, as a journalist, I was writing a lot about city planning, architecture, and also made a film about architecture. I mean, so it's, in some way, it's stories that I've been touched. I mean, the content of Push, in many ways, is based on knowledge I've been carrying for 30 years, maybe. Then, of course, when I decide to make a film, I have to focus the research. But also, I mean, Push is something that is, I have some kind of knowledge of how the world functions, but then I don't know exactly. So, I mean, the process of Push is then, okay, what is it I don't understand? I need to get beyond, so it's like I'm kind of pushing myself and me and the editor. So, I mean, the process of Push, you haven't seen the film yet. Maybe I should show the trailer. Shut up. And meanwhile, I will actually go to the toilet. It's a good thing. So if you miss me, I will be back.
My neighbors bought this place for $1 million, and then they managed to sell
Have you ever been to a dinner party where people talk about housing prices?
Wherever I go around the planet, anybody I talk to, no matter if they're rich, middle class or poor, they all talk about the feeling of being pushed out from the place where they would like to live. In many cities, the push means to live in a place with no jobs, really far away, so you can't get on your bike to meet your friends. For some years I've been working on Push, together with editor Eric and producer Margaret. and a big team, of course, and it's a documentary investigating why it's so expensive to live in cities. And it's not only about gentrification, it's much deeper than that. You might know me as a director of Bananas and Big Boys Gone Bananas, about big corporations investing millions to cover up their own lack of moral and responsibility. Or Bike vs. Cars, about lobby-driven city planning. I'm proud to say that these films are used as tools for change. People all over the world meet around the films. Bike vs. Cars has been screened over 2,600 times in 90 countries. And after the film, people tend to talk about their own city. And that's why we want your help with Push. So we're now asking for help to create a conversation around Push and the global housing crisis. This crowdfunding campaign is a starting point. We need to reach cool and smart people all over the world who are eager to take action for this basic human right of a home. We need money to finish the film, but also to keep the conversation going, to be able to push back. That's how we try to make the audience be our friends. Let's see, here's the official trailer. Like this, is it? Yeah.
You know, the first sign that you're gonna have to leave your neighborhood is when vintage clothing shops show up. Then the housing value's gonna go up and then they're all gonna get the push.
In the Greater Toronto area of the last 30 years, housing prices have increased by 425%.
Then we start asking, who's gonna live in cities? Who are cities for?
They wanna raise the rent up to like $900 each. If it goes to $3,400, then I have to make at least $100,000 a year.
I've seen the whole area change. They start buying up properties because it's a fantastic investment for them.
When I hear people today saying it's gentrification, one reaction, an ironic reaction, is if only. It's much deeper than that.
Owning the house is only a means to making money.
New owners have taken over. We haven't met them, we haven't seen them, we don't know anything about them. It could be Frosty the Snowman for all I know.
I heard one of the councillors said, if you can't live in Notting Hill, then you shouldn't be in Notting Hill. Who the fuck is he to say something like that?
I can stand in the middle of the street and no traffic coming.
Paradisi fiscali sono il luogo dove capitalismo legale si incontrano.
Gold is not a human right. Housing is. We need to reclaim the fundamental right to housing.
So anyway, yeah, so my push is, I don't have a big plan when I started to shoot that film. I know what I'm interested in, I know what I'm looking for, but I don't really know how to tell the story. So this is kind of the in-between. It's not, I still don't know the name of my kind of films. So of course, I've been reading a lot. I have a lot of research. I know I'm trying to understand stuff. And you saw in... If there is a place for one more time. Improvisation. Yes, it's totally open for improvisation. What that means, you know, it's in some way I need to throw myself out there, and then I have in my body something that says, okay, I should probably go in this direction. This is interesting, not this. You know, you have to, I mean, filmmaking is very much about decisions. If you're in edit, you asked me about the time in edit. We can easily sit for 6 months with the best editors. So it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. Hours. With Push, the first shots I did was with Leilani Farah, the woman you met here, and I found her on Twitter, and because Twitter is a great place for research, also Facebook, but I mean Twitter is better. You find people. I mean if you're into people who share stories, and in Bike versus Cars, there was a red-haired woman, a professor from Sao Paulo, Raquel Rolnik, who has like an expert role in bikes, and when she was then the UN Special Rapporteur on housing. When she stopped, Leilani got the job. So I started to follow her on Twitter just to see, because I knew I was going towards that subject matter. So I was reading stuff she was sending out for a long time, maybe half a year, and then suddenly there was one story that I found, wow, this is interesting, because she was talking about something I really hadn't heard before: financialization, commodification of housing. Wow, so that's the story. It touched something that was something that I, okay, because we've been talking so much about gentrification. Gentrification is flying around like, this kind of strange word, and the gentrifier is a hipster with beard, or is a tattoo shop, or a yoga studio, or the cool coffee. And in that storytelling, suddenly the hipster is also the one who destroys the city, which is like, it's so stupid. And I knew that from before, that it's a totally stupid. And that's like the left has kind of been using this kind of very sloppy description of the society, and I think that's been standing in the way of understanding. So when Leilani posted that, I found it really interesting. So I contacted her and asked if we could have a Skype. And luckily, she didn't have so many followers on Twitter, so she actually had followed me back. and then I sent her some of my films. And then we talked. And over Skype, you can get the feeling if this is a person that can work on camera. If it's, because if she had been really boring, human rights, boring NGO person, I mean, it would be impossible. So it is some kind of casting process. And I think casting in documentaries is like, it's key. And sometimes if you're really close to a story, if you're really, as you asked me, if you want to tell the right story, viva, then you might go with the right person, with the right message, but who doesn't work in front of the camera. And then you sit there with a film that will never fly, because whenever that person comes on screen, people say, So it's casting of characters are really important. And when I talked to her over Skype, and I did the same with this Brazilian girl in Bike versus Cars. I met her first over Skype. And said, wow, she has something. And then I asked Leilani, are you coming to Europe, anything? She lives in Canada. Yes, she was going to London. So, okay, let's meet in London. Can we film with you for 3-4 days? Yes, you can. And then we met I set up the meeting with the Saskia Sassen, this professor in London. We visited some different locations, we filmed. And then I went back to my editor, we edited, and we said, okay, but she actually works fine on camera. And she has the right energy, the right way to frame this story. Wow, I was really happy. Then she had an official mission as the UN rapporteurs. They go to official visits to countries, and she was going to Chile. I worked a lot in Chile. I speak Spanish. I have friends there. My cinematographer from Bike vs. Cars, Janice, she lives in Brazil. So, Janice, can you come with me? My producer friend Alexandra, she helped me. So we went to Chile and filmed with Leilani for a week or a little bit more. And then I've also been a lot to Toronto, also through the Bike vs. Cars film, but also for the festival. I've been many times. So I went to Toronto and filmed with Leilani, I think 2 or 3 days in her own country. I went back, I edited, I suddenly had a pitch trailer, you know, I had a project that I could start to fund the film. But I still didn't know how to tell the story totally, you know. So it's for me, the process has been shooting, editing, and asking myself more questions. What do I don't understand? And you know, so my basic rule is if I understand it, I mean, I have to explain it in a way so I understand it myself. So I can explain to you talking. I don't want to, I'm not making films for academics or for people who write on the cultural pages. I want, in some way, I would like 12-year-olds to understand my films. At least the emotional impact should land also. And of course, there will be details that some people catch, other people don't. But I mean, in general thing, people should be able to follow the film and sit there, even if they are just young people. And I think it works, and that's cool. More questions? No? Oh, yes.
Okay, so thank you for a lecture. Okay, so we learned today that companies influence the media in a large scale, and it had changed a lot in the past 30 years. And like my concern is that countries are getting weaker and companies even more stronger day by day. And identity politics is simply everywhere, from food to animals. And it's like, how do you see the future of documentaries in the next 30 years?
That's cool. How do I see the future of documentaries in the next 30 years? Interesting. I have no idea, to be honest, but I can try to answer anyway. Documentaries have for a long time been like the art form for the people who want to criticize and to show the reality. It's been very much the underdog's perspective in documentaries. That's what I also represent in many ways. In that sense, I'm a traditional filmmaker, even if my films are not so traditional. I mean, but I share the perspective with the earlier generations. But you can clearly see that the genre of documentary now is not at all a left-wing art form. It's a very commercial art form. It's cheaper to produce a documentary than a fiction film, and you can make at least the same kind of money out of a documentary. So there's a lot of new money coming into documentaries, and you can see at Netflix or HBO or whatever they're called, all these platforms, that there are a lot of new films coming in. I mean, the biopics, it's like it's a flood of biopics out there, and many of them are paid by record companies or by somebody else. It's like so in documentaries are much more commercial, and it's not always the filmmaker's perspective. It's not the filmmaker's films. It's the producer's film. It's the funder's film, and that is one tendency that is strong now. And some of these films also might come out as good films. I mean, I'm not saying that everything is bad, but it's you can see the commercial interest in the background. But the big thing over my years in documentary film is that the tools of making films are much more, let's say, democratic right now. Everybody can edit. I mean, a 12-year-old can make a documentary. They can film, they can edit, and they do. I mean, you look at the young YouTubers, they are producing every day. So documentaries can be made by anyone right now. And that's cool. It's cool. It doesn't mean that the films are so good. But I see that the genre is growing stronger. That I'm here with you and that you are in this room is because you also are a part of a documentary world. I mean, you see, I swapped quickly by some of the numbers of countries where my film had been shown. I mean, the previous generations did not have their films go to so many countries. So we talk a lot about the piracy. The piracy destroyed the business of documentary. In some ways, for the most successful, before they made a lot of money on DVDs and all that stuff, which is totally gone. But the piracy also gave us an audience, So the audience is much bigger. People can find films now. My films are out on Vimeo. So if you want to see my films, you go to my webpage, wgfilm.com, and all films are out there. And honestly, I have every week people from 30, 40 countries watching some of my films. It's mostly one per country. It's not really a business, but there is an audience in a way, and I think it's kind of hopeful. I mean, if documentaries before were, like you said, political tools, a bit boring, now there is a lot of good films out there. I think the overall, the genre of documentaries is stronger and it's better quality now. I mean, if you go to Zagreb Docs or you look at the programming of Restart, it's a lot of good films. And you could probably program even more films. So I think, but 30 years from now, well, I still believe that you need somebody who wants to tell a story. You need a good cinematographer, you need a good editor, you need a good composer and a good sound designer, you need a good grading artist. I mean, good films will still be teamwork. And I think that will continue. Any more questions?
Did you ever try to make a fiction film, strong political fiction film? Because you couldn't find a way, for example, how to make documentary.
Yeah.
But you wanted to tell the story.
I mean, if I did a documentary, that would be the reason. But I did fiction, but I'm not so interested in fiction, and I'm not so sure that I'm the best one to make fiction, because it's also a very special trade. I know it's a lot of documentary filmmakers go towards fiction because a lot of it do it because it's better money in fiction. It's easier to survive, also for the producers. I think the power of documentary is much stronger. Very rarely fiction films hit people in the stomach or in the chest the same way as a documentary can do. it's not that easy. So I think the power of documentary is the people we film and show, and we can understand that these are real people out there, and I think that's really cool. So you will not see my name on the fiction film, I think. But if you want to do fiction, you should do it, and I'm sure there is important stories that are easier to tell if you can write the whole script. I mean, the challenge for documentary film is almost all the time, how do we establish characters? How do we establish a story? That's the kind of the challenge of all films. And it's if you can write all those things, it's easier. So for us, that's the big challenge. And I mean, I was looking at, at Push, for example. I mean, the editing process of half a year, we move around the opening scene. Oh, suddenly we put it one step in and we move that out, or we kick that out, or, but of course you do the same in fiction. But establishing character, establishing the feel of the film is it's not so easy, because you want to kind of, when you open a film, Push, we open at the bar in Toronto. You see a little bit of it in the trailer, but it's there to point out the subject matter, but it's also a message of community. It's also a place where we would like to be. It's also there is room for some smiles, because you can give the permission for people to have a smile early in the film. It's hard to make people smile if you start to have really tough shit happening. You can't make people smile later on. So you need to give that permission in the beginning of the film, like when you make the contract with your audience in some way. So it's a lot of those things that would have been easier with fiction, but it's probably not easy in fiction either. How would I know? Any more questions? Yeah?
My question would be regarding making a pitch when it comes to before making and everything, because what I've noticed in documentary filmmaking and journalism in general, when it comes to editors, they're very disinterested in most of the ideas that they get on the table, not necessarily because they have too much skin in the game or they think it's controversial, they just think it's stupid and nobody's going to want to watch it. So I wanted to ask you, what is your technique when you hit the wall? How do you curve it, and when do you compromise? That would be it.
I have a hard problem to listening with the mask on. Can you
sure.
make a short version without the mask?
Yeah, sure. So, hi. My question would be regarding making a pitch before filming, because what I've noticed...
The pitch, you mean?
Yeah, the pitch.
Yeah.
Because what I've noticed when it comes to editors and documentary filmmaking, journalism in general, they're very disinterested in pretty much anything that lands on their table, and not because they think it's controversial, that it might affect them negatively, but they just think it's stupid, nobody's going to get it, nobody's going to watch it. When do you, hit the wall, when do you curve it, and when do you decide to compromise, and when do you decide, I don't know, to maybe completely move away?
Yeah, I don't want to compromise, that's for sure. But it's a very relevant question, because we need money to make our films, so we need somebody to believe in it. And my films, the ones I've been talking about here, are on paper. Nobody understands them. It's like they're kind of hard to pitch. So to be able to pitch, I need to shoot. So it's very much also the funding of my films are very much a step-by-step process. Of course, sometimes I can get early development money from the Swedish Film Fund, or from the kind of the closer you have. But I mean, for broadcasters, for example, even with the Swedish ones, I wait I wait to talk to them, because I know they will say exactly what you said. Yeah, but we should do it like this, and blah, 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 blah. You know, they always know best, and they have like some kind of current affairs in their head. So when I do something that sounds close to a current affairs take on a subject matter, they don't think I do it right. So it takes time. It's and you have to believe in your idea, but the best way to convince people is to film, to edit, and to develop your own idea, because all ideas are fluffy in the beginning. You have many different aspects. So it's very much about sharpening it, taking away aspects. Okay, I really would like to talk about this, but maybe next film and next film. So it's this kind of creating this arrow in some way. That's the challenge in every project, to find your own focus. Because in the beginning, you know, you should be like that. You should be looking wider around. And for me, my process is this kind of wide scope, and then I start to film, and then the first scenes I do, they kind of point in new directions, and then I understand that this process of this film now will go in a different direction, so I have to say goodbye to that aspect and so on. So it's very much in some way an improvisation. I don't have a fixed plan. Yeah, something like that. But believe in your idea, but you also have to, if people don't get it, it's your problem, you know. If people don't get your idea, it's up to you to win them. And you can't do it by being angry, so you have to do it by coming back and showing something clearer. That's like step by step. Yes? Any more questions? You can keep asking questions, it's not a problem. I have time. If the bar is still open when we're open, yeah, yeah, right, there's a film showing here soon, it's called Push, which I recommend you to see in half an hour, yeah.
Maybe just last question I would like to ask, maybe you can tell us a little bit about the theme or the subject of your next project.
That's the classical journalist question. That's the one I hate to answer normally. Okay, but this is going out online, that's the problem, so then you have to close the recording. Yeah, I'm working on a new project, which has some kind of relation to the films I've talked about. So the effect of the most powerful on our lives. But I don't want to have it online. So because it doesn't really help me doing the film to talk about the film. And also I also have the feeling that nobody really understands me. I can see when I start to talk, I tell the film, I can see people wander away and, you know, what is he talking? I don't really get this. So I need to shoot more. And you know, as you know, I haven't been able to film. And so I can't really move my project. I can't pitch them because I don't have the material to pitch. I've got development money, but and I shot a little bit, but I needed real stories, the flesh and blood stories, and so I'm planning. I have lined up places where I want to go, and I have characters. I even have team booked, but I'm pushing, as we all do. But I hope it comes a film out of it, and then I hope I can come back and show it. Okay, thank you very much. And also one more thing. I've been in this pandemic. I started to make a podcast together with the main character of Push, Leilani Farah. So we have a podcast called Pushback Talks, which you can find on all platforms. It's a way of keeping my brain going and my research going, because it's in some way it also helps me research a new project, even if this is also a continuation of Push, but it keeps me learning new stuff. So, and I also see it as a part of some kind of audience building for a new project. And the podcast we started last summer, we have audience now in 108 countries, which is kind of cool. It tells you something about the global world we live in, globalization. We are sharing the same problems, a lot of us, and I like that a lot. I mean, I travel a lot with my films. I like to meet the audience, and not only because I like to walk in new cities and drink local wine, also because I learn a lot. So it's kind of a lot of my research for the next project is also walking the streets of Zagreb in some way. Okay, thank you very much.
Moramo sad samo proluftati dvoranu, pa ako ćete ostati na sljedećem...